genre.
Hello and welcome back to The Doctor's Companion presents Doctor Who, The Long Way Round, the weekly podcast where we review and discuss every episode of Doctor Who, one doctor at a time. I'm Nick Jimenez.
I'm Scott Corelli.
And I'm Cass Fredrickson.
Today on the show, we're discussing Vincent and the Doctor, the 11th Doctor's 8th story.
Vincent and the Doctor is, I think arguably one of the strongest episodes of the 11th Doctor's era. It comes from writer Richard Curtis, who of course is most famous for writing things like Love Actually, Bridget Jones's Diary, Notting Hill, Four Weddings and a Funeral, About Time, which he wrote after writing this, I believe. He and Stephen Moffat go way back because Curtis, before sort of diving into rom-coms, he founded Comic Relief in 1985, which is like a big BBC comedy thing. And in 1999, the 1999 edition of Comic Relief, Curtis hired Stephen Moffat to write a little thing called Curse of Fatal Death, starring his kind of like partner in comedy, Rowan Atkinson, who he had worked on with worked with on the Blackadder show and Mr. Bean. So so like everything was just sort of connected, I guess, with this. And when Moffat took over the show of Doctor Who, 9 years later, he asked Richard Curtis if he wanted to do it, if he wanted to do the show. And Richard Curtis, who never really had fond feelings for Doctor Who, had never really watched the show and didn't really have a strong interest or desire to write this, was kind of waffling back and forth on it. And but he had always had this story rolling around in his head about how he wanted to write some kind of story involving Vincent Van Gogh. And because he was very fascinated by the character of Vincent Van Gogh and a lot of the things that they talk about in this episode of like writing beautiful things while also being like overwhelmed with pain and all of this, and just this like optimism through pessimism thing that people have interpreted from Vincent Van Gogh's work. And so he was like, okay, well, maybe I could do this. But he still wasn't sure about the Doctor Who thing until he watched the 2008 Christmas special, The Next Doctor, which I think was the next episode that aired after Stephen Moffat was given the reins of the series. And so he watched that, and his neighbor happened to be starring in that episode, David Morrissey. And
what?
It's a lot of serendipity in this. And so he watched it because he was like, oh, it's my neighbor David. And then watched the episode and was like, well, that was actually a pretty good time. I think I could do this.
I agree, Richard.
and so
that episode was a good time.
And so he decided that he would write this Vincent Van Gogh thing. At first, Moffat was iffy about Vincent Van Gogh as a subject matter because he was worried that the material and the themes were a little too dark for Doctor Who. Kind of felt more like a Torchwood thing than a Doctor Who thing. But they talked it out and talked about how the plot would work and how he would deal with this difficult subject matter of mental illness and things. And Stephen Moffat became more comfortable with it because he like saw the value in it and in the way that Richard Curtis was going to be interpreting it. So once Moffat was on board with the subject matter, he and Curtis sort of collaborated on the plot with the monsters being invisible and things like that. At one point, there were going to be 2 monsters, and one was going to be killed, and then the other one was going to kill itself rather than be alone. And they decided not to go that route. The script was originally going to be titled Eyes That See the Darkness, based on the description of Vincent Van Gogh having eyes that know the darkness in my soul in a Don McLean's song called Vincent, inspired by Van Gogh's Starry Night. Moffat, however, preferred a less abstruse title, and so it became Vincent and the Doctor.
Which, without knowing the episode, almost sounds like hackish.
Yeah, it does.
Like they're going to be like back to back on a movie poster.
Yeah, it really, honestly, in retrospect, it really does seem like it should be called like Vincent and Amy. Not
excluding Amy from the title is kind of like the one minor thing that's like not quite so perfect about this episode.
Yeah, I would say so. So we were watching this earlier, and my instinct was correct. We were watching this earlier and saw the Doctor like running through these like cobblestone streets, and I was like, did they shoot this in the same place they shot Vampires in Venice? And they did. It was in the same block schedule with Vampires in Venice, and they shot both episodes in the same town of Trogir, Croatia. So yeah, there we go. They shot in a place that was neither Italy nor I don't know where he is in this. Where is this supposed to take place? It's not Dutch. It's not. Yeah,
I don't know.
Oh gosh, yeah, he's from Holland, but he doesn't say where he is.
Right? Yeah, I don't remember the town that he's in. In any event, yeah. So they shot the whole thing in multiple iterations. One of the things that was interesting was Bill Nighy being cast as the museum curator, who this was his first job working on Doctor Who, but was not his first, I guess, run-in with Doctor Who, because according to a lot of sources, including himself, he was the role of the Ninth Doctor was down to him, Hugh Grant, and Christopher Eccleston. And Hugh Grant was offered it, turned it down, and it went to Christopher Eccleston, which made Bill Nighy the third choice, apparently.
What?
Yeah, to play the Ninth Doctor, and instead it ended up going to Christopher Eccleston. But he was so close to getting the role that the tabloids all called him as the Ninth Doctor, literally a few days before the announcement that Christopher Eccleston got the role. And I guess there is a suggestion that he lost the role because of the tabloids reporting that he
That's not
got
his
it.
fault.
And then like BBC just being like, nope, can't let the tabloids win.
Oh
They
my
have to be wrong.
God.
Yeah. So in any event, kind of an interesting what if, the idea of Bill Nighy being the Ninth Doctor.
Yeah, like would he still be Davy Jones?
I don't know. Yeah, because that would have been at the same time. Like exactly the same time. Interesting.
Is that right?
Yeah, because
06?
No, 05 was when when
Yeah,
Doctor Who
but Dead
came
Man's
out.
Chest came out in 06.
Right. And when did they probably shot it around the same time.
I mean, they shot both of them, so like it had to have been like a huge shoot.
Wow.
Yeah. And who knows, he might have been on the show longer than a season, you know?
He might not have like reacted to whatever happened with Eccleston, that he was like, I'm not into this.
Yeah.
Maybe Bill Nighy was like, oh, this is a cool party. I'll see you for 12 years.
Yeah. So this was he decided to be in this because he was a good friend of Curtis's, and was like and Richard Curtis wrote the role for him, and so he was like, yeah, sure, I'll do a day on Doctor Who and memorize a bunch of stuff about Vincent Van Gogh and bow ties. So yeah, that's it. I mean, it was a pretty much a they had an idea for an episode, and I all of the interesting stuff I think came with all the serendipity that led to its creation.
Sure.
There was
Love Actually is all around.
Yeah. there is one the episode did go over, so it's a little longer than most of the episodes this season. And upon watching the episode, the BBC were just like, yeah, we don't want you to cut anything. It's fine. Because they'd already cut 2 storylines in it. One was the mother of Gazelle, the girl who dies. A lot of her stuff was cut because I guess that was like more of a story thread than it was just like an event that happens. And then also there was a whole storyline where the reason that the Doctor is so antsy about finding the monster is because he grew up on Gallifrey reading a book, like a children's book about this monster. Like apparently it was like a children's book monster that he was aware of. And so it always scared him as a kid. And so that's why he's like acting all nervous on the day where like he's like taking a long time to paint the church, and he's like being all antsy and weird about it. Apparently that was the reason why his performance is that way.
That's funny.
There's a whole deleted storyline about him like being legitimately terrified of the monster. So
the giant chicken lizards that no one can see.
Yeah. But yeah, they cut those 2 things out, and then that got them down to 50 minutes, and they were like, we don't know what else to do. And then the BBC was like, okay, it's fine. We'll just let it run over 5 minutes. So yeah, that's it. Vincent of the Doctor. So yeah, I mean, is this a good episode? I don't know.
Is that where you're at?
No,
Okay.
I love this episode.
Okay.
No, it's like a masterpiece.
Right.
Yeah.
It almost becomes, because like when this came out 11 years ago, that's kind of fun. He was like, it was immediately like this was like a great episode, and people were saying like this is the best episode of the show, like period. But you couldn't say that,
right?
But now it's having watched so much of this show, it almost actually becomes more impressive, because it's operating on just such another emotional level than the show certainly used to, in its classic era. And I think I didn't know that he like had no kind of attachment to it as a kid or whatever. And like, that's really cool. I think that shows what can happen when you just bring someone in that, unlike Moffat, who I love Moffat, like didn't grow up watching the show every morning, and has like a new way of looking at it, and a new way of looking at what's interesting and compelling about the Doctor and his ability to travel through time.
Yeah, absolutely. Cass?
Yeah, I don't know. This is like an all-time classic for me. I think I've seen this one the most out of all the episodes of Doctor Who, except for 11th Hour, which I have definitely watched like 8 times or something. And it's always fun kind of seeing which parts of it make me cry this time. Because by the end of it, I am just like a mess of a human. And it's the performances are all really good. I think like the fact that the alien is invisible is like ridiculously genius, because like they don't have to waste all their budget on like animating it throughout the whole thing. It's just like the shots that we kind of get a glimpse of it. And like I think at the time I was like, oh, the invisible alien's kind of silly, but like now it's just like, I don't know, it works. And I think
it fits the theme so well too. The idea of like the way that people with mental illness are just sort of like gaslit by
society,
mentally healthy people, like society, where they're just like get over it, like you're just a little sad, like all of that, and that like using this invisible monster as like the embodiment of that idea, that concept is just brilliant. I think,
and I really like the fact that like they win, but like it's not really a victory. It's like really sad. So I'm still very impressed with this episode. I can't believe it's been like over a decade since it first came out, but we're old.
Yeah, the thing that I really appreciated the mental health stuff revisiting it because I'm the opposite. I think I may have seen this episode once, maybe twice. We've talked about it. I don't rewatch the show a lot, except when I do, and then when I do, I watch like 5 in a row in like a day. And like the way that the Doctor and Amy sort of through trial and error learn how to interact with Vincent, and like their patience and empathy towards him really resonated with me. Like watching it this time, and then also like the way that they managed to dovetail this kind of goofy chicken monster into like the theme of the episode. And when Vincent accidentally kills it, he not only exhibits empathy for this monster, but empathy for the people that throw stones at him and call him crazy. And he's like, oh, they're just scared, just like this thing was scared. And the miracle of this episode is, although it does tell why Vincent Van Gogh is like one of the greatest humans who ever lived, in the context of the story, you also get to see what makes him like a remarkable person, even to the Doctor and Amy, of like, whoa, that's where, and that really hit me this time.
I love all of that. And the mental health stuff is stuff that like definitely flew over my head really the first time I watched it, like the way that it all fit, because I wasn't I don't know, that stuff just wasn't as accessible as it is now, where like people talk about it openly, like on Twitter and things like that a lot. And so,
it also plays really well to the artists who watch the show,
right? Of
like, oh, the fulfillment of like, oh, to be appreciated.
That sort of like narcissistic quality that all of us artists have.
Or like love and appreciation, because like Van Gogh gave his soul to his art, and so to hear Bill Nighy, you're like, oh, like one person got it. No, I mean, absolutely. That's definitely a part of it. That's definitely the part that I focused on. Before learning more about other like the mental health stuff. I think that it's an episode that is, I mean, it's beautiful, and I do remember, as Nick was talking about earlier, when it first came out. And everyone was sort of looking around. You just got this feeling amongst Doctor Who fans of everyone looking around, being like, "Was that the best episode of the show so far? Who's gonna say it first?" And like, no one was gonna say it, and so it just sort of like went in and out, and everyone was like, "That was a pretty good episode." And then like, every year after, people were like, "Remember Vincent and the Doctor? That was really good. This made me cry. I watch it every year."
Yeah.
This art, it started becoming a thing to even like, it became part of Van Gogh. It almost felt like fans, you started seeing Starry Night with the TARDIS on like my friends' walls in college, or it would be like their phone art.
Yeah, for sure. I think part of that reaction, that initial reaction, is, I don't know if you guys remember this, but I remember people were dreading this episode because it was Richard Curtis, and everyone was like, the Love Actually guy? Ugh, gross. Like, why are you letting him write an episode? Because people already hated that movie at that point. And
do people hate that movie?
Yeah. Oh God, people despise that movie.
Oh, okay. Because like it's funny, you were like rattling off all of the movies that he's written. I was like, oh, I've never seen any of these. Because like Love Actually is on like everyone's like feel good Christmas movie list. So I'm just like, oh,
well, like the Vision says in Civil War Cast, that provokes challenge.
Yeah. I'm of the belief that Love Actually is like a 50-50 good movie and 50-50 a like an unwatchable movie. Like half of it is,
well, that's good. It's very easily skippable to skip parts.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, half of it is like borderline unwatchable, and then the other half I adore so much, including very specifically the Bill Nighy stuff, which I think is incredible. So like I think that there was a hesitance from a lot of people to praise this episode because they were like, we don't want to praise the Love Actually guy. And so there was definitely that going on, big time. And I saw the same thing happen again with About Time, where when About Time came out, everyone was like, boo, Richard Curtis, right? But then like a lot of people were like, I don't know, I thought that was actually really, that was really good. I don't know. And then like as time has gone by, now it's like a classic movie and like everybody seems to really like it.
Yeah, it takes like 10 years.
Yeah. It's really interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I think this episode is phenomenal for so many reasons. I think it's a really funny episode. It just has everything you want from Doctor Who, right? A fun, cool monster. You get like a historical figure, which is cool. You get like fun, like stupid Doctor Who stuff, like you're Scottish, so therefore you have like a Danish accent according to him, like you speak his language, you know. It's because that's why you're hearing Scottish from him. I love that. That's stupid and great. Yeah, I don't know. It's like everything you could want. It's great.
And I think that's what keeps people coming back to it so much, is so much of it is just like really comfortable and fun to slip back into.
Yeah. It's interesting that this is like, you know, looking back, we're almost at the end of this season of Doctor Who. We're almost at the end of this season of Long Way Around also, but of series 5 of Doctor Who.
Maybe the greatest series of the show.
Possibly, quite possibly. But like looking back, I was just thinking like, wow, it is crazy that there are 2 absolute banger all-timer episodes in this season. Because that rarely happens where you get like 2. It's usually 1, right?
If you're lucky.
And here you get 11th Hour, which is an all-timer. I mean, it really is. It's a phenomenal regeneration story, or post-regeneration story, rather. And then you get Vincent the Doctor, which is just like one of those, I think, up there with The Girl in the Fireplace in terms of like, if you're just going to show an episode of Doctor Who to someone, like that just sort of represents the show. This is a really good example of one. It's I just think it's brilliant. The
chemistry between Matt Smith and Karen Gillan, terrific in this.
Oh, so good. The chemistry between Karen Gillan and the actor who plays Vincent, really phenomenal, as well. So
they have like this primal, like Cloud Atlas connection.
Yeah,
where they just sense something in the other one.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. No, it's just really good. I
had a lot of fun when we went into the TARDIS and the Doctor was like investigating the monster, and he had like the typewriter that was also a printer, and just all that fun kind of Clockwork Fairy Tale stuff is so gorgeous in this episode.
Oh yeah, I love all of that stuff as well. Yeah, I mean, I just really like. I like what it says about mental illness too, in terms of like, your instinct is that you want to help, but like the reality is that you can't really. Like all you can do is like try to make it easier, or you know, not judge them and like let them go through what they're going through or what have you. Because like, especially back then when there's like no medication and you know, like it was just a nightmare. And so like I loved that, you know, I think Nick, you were talking about that the sort of like empathy that they have for Vincent, where like Vincent is having a sort of like not a manic, a depressive episode there on the bed, and the Doctor like tries to help and then realizes that he can't, and it's like, okay, like we'll go, it's okay, and then, you know, gives him his space, and then that gives him the room to sort of like roll out of that situation that he's in, and then pull himself back together, and is like, okay, let's go do the thing. Like, I just like how all of it is treated. It's like, we're not judging you for what you're going through because we know you can't help it. We're just here when you need us, and when you need us to not be here, then we won't be. And I think that's a depiction of it that you don't get to see a lot. It's usually mentally healthy people like trying to like force the mental illness out of the person, you know?
Yeah,
because they're like, no, but I love you, I care about you, get better, right? You know? Yeah.
Because it's not as easy as like, oh, I did one thing, like one nice thing for this person, so like that makes them fixed, quote unquote fixed.
Right.
And the scene with him crying on the bed like hit me really hard this time too, because it underscores how isolating it is to suffer from like depression and stuff like that. So, and I like that even though like the Doctor and Amy might not understand what he's going through, like they're still there when he's ready to be like, okay, I want to paint now, you know?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and I think, you know, Karen Gillan and Matt Smith both like do really underrated work of communicating especially Amy, like the want of like, I wish I want to help so bad.
Mhm.
I want to get in there and do the magic thing or say the thing.
Mhm.
And the journey that she goes on, underscored by how friggin' adorable and baby-like they both look. But like,
They're children, babies. I couldn't get over it.
but like, yeah, and like the journey that Amy goes on when she is met with the inevitability of time, and she's like, well, was it all just, oh, so none of it mattered because it didn't end happy.
yeah.
And you know, there's a reason that the Doctor's lines in that scene are like on people's walls and in diaries and tumblers and stuff. Is it really resonates with people
Mhm.
in a real way of like, yeah, we can't always control what people do, but we can control like who we, you know, yeah, the good pile and the bad pile.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like just a wise piece of writing nestled in this like science fiction television show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I want to say something kind of, I guess, kind of a hot take. So something that people will say is like, oh, Bill Nighy, it's a shame that he was wasted in Vincent and the Doctor.
Mhm.
Or like, I've probably said it on the show. It's like, they used him too soon.
Mhm.
And watching it this time, I just think it's really effing cool that the only time Bill Nighy's ever in the show is like doing a favor for his pal Richard Curtis
Mhm.
in this like really beautiful, understated role where he's kind of almost just playing himself.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it kind of is nice. You know, I mean, the thing is, it's just sort of like the idea of like the actor wasted is just because you want to see more of them.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah,
that's all it ever is. I mean, if like if like Jodie Whittaker wanted to just swing by this museum and pick up the curator and like make him a companion for a season,
I need you again.
that'd be great. I mean, you know, that'd be great. I don't need to play a different character. I just want more of them. You know,
That would be
ultimately.
great.
Yeah, God, yeah. But
I also want his little mirror harness backpack thing to come back.
mhm.
This little like alien identification thing.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah, I mean, this is a really beautiful, just borderline flawless episode, really. It's and I only say borderline because I mean we don't like that Amy isn't represented in the title. And I'm sure there's something else that could be better. I don't know, but it is I mean, it's just an excellent episode. It's as close to perfect as I think Doctor Who episodes get.
Oh, the joke that the machine isn't able to scan Vincent's painting because he's an impressionist.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's God, everything about this is so good. Yeah. I love all of the stuff with Vincent just not giving a crap about any of his work.
Yeah.
And just like painting over a painting and like, like it just it's so good. It just reminds me of like the stories that you hear about Jack Kirby where he would like tear up old original art and write his lunch order
Oh
on
my
the back
God, yeah.
as like scrap paper. And it's just like, you have no idea what that's going to be worth in the future. Oh God. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why this episode is so beloved by artists is the idea that like the little things that we toil away on, they aren't useless, that they could be appreciated in ways that we're not able to understand
Mhm.
like in our lifetime. And even if you take that out of creative work, you know, just like we don't know the impact that we have on people in general.
Yeah.
Which is
Absolutely.
really like that's the whole point of the show, like period. Like at least in the new stuff, like you know, it's like the ordinary people that are like extraordinary.
Right.
Um,
I've never met a person who wasn't extraordinary or
yeah.
whatever
Or
the quote
wasn't
is.
special.
Wasn't special. I've never met a person who wasn't special.
Yeah.
That is special. I've never met a person that wasn't special. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the best. Yeah.
Wasn't important. There it is.
Important.
Yeah, no one
Okay.
important.
Okay, important. Yeah.
We got there.
Yeah, we got there in the end.
Yeah, it's just it's so crazy just how quickly Matt Smith just like locked on to who that specifically this character was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's quite a thing to see. I really do hope that, as we're looking back and we'll have more to say about this in next week's episode, I think. But I really do hope that when Jodie Whittaker's run on the show is over, and then we're starting to look back at her stories, that we feel as fondly about her as taken as a whole as we do now, like Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi. Where we look back and you're like, I like this.
I follow Doctor Who on Twitter, and every few days they'll just show like a GIF from the Witchfinders or anything, and I'm like, I miss 13 so much. I miss.
Yeah. All right. Do we have anything else to say about Vincent and the Doctor? This incredible episode of Doctor Who?
I don't think so. It's hard to talk about something that is so like unanimously like across the board, like just solid 10,
Yeah.
His costume is like when he was wearing like 9 layers. In the summer.
After his depressive episode, and then he comes out and he's wearing like the Van Gogh outfit, and it's just like he just like stepped out. I was like, wow, the costume designers really knocked it out of the park with this. This thing, I would wear the shit out of that outfit. I just love it so much. It's so great. But I also really love the Invisible Monsters effects, like the way that they would have him like bump into stuff and stuff fall over. It all felt very solid and just really well done. I assume it was like some form of puppetry that was going on that they were doing, but with that stuff, but it worked really well. I loved the way all of it looked. It was so practical. It felt so practical, which is ironic considering it's like an invisible monster.
Right.
But yeah,
I think I definitely found myself appreciating the direction this time watching it again.
Yeah, we should shout him out. Johnny Campbell directed this. I don't know if he directed another episode.
Wow.
I want to look at this up. I don't know. Maybe he directed Vampires in Venice too?
Yes, he did. Those are the only 2.
Oh, he did. Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
Wow, 2 bangers.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Crazy.
Nice. Vampires in Venice pales in comparison to this, but it's still good.
It's
still a super solid episode. All right. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah.
To this week's episode of The Doctor's Companion. We'll be back next week to talk about Into the Dalek and wrap up our 8th season of The Long Way Around. Check out our Patreon, duelinggenre.com/support, where if we reach 100 patrons, we're going to have all the patrons vote for a bonus podcast that will be in the main feed of that podcast's podcast. I don't know what I'm saying. of that podcast main feed.
It won't be behind a paywall.
It will not be behind a paywall. Exactly. and by doing so, you'll also get all of the bonus content that we do have on the Dueling Genre Patreon. But yeah, you will be helping us cross a goal by once we get to 100 patrons, and a bonus podcast for all. So go check that out, because that's going to be how we cover any bonus stuff here. If you want to hear us talk about Torchwood, if you want to hear us talk about Sarah Jane Adventures, K9, some of like the weirder extracurricular Big Finish stuff, whatever. If you want to hear us talk about that stuff, that would be a bonus podcast that would need to be voted on by our patrons. So become a Patreon supporter at duelinggenre.com/support. We appreciate everyone who's already doing that and anyone who is planning on doing that. But we will talk to you again next week with Into the Dalek. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.